So we've seen a lot of Ryloth in the Clone Wars, but thanks to the Bad Batch, we're starting to get a look at what the planet went through following the end of the war. So I figured today we could go over the history of Ryloth after Order 66. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So we're all aware of Ryloth. It's the home of the Twi'leks and the site of the Battle of Ryloth during the Clone Wars. During that battle, Republic forces, with the aid of the Free Ryloth Movement, a local resistance force, were able to expel the Separatists that had moved in and occupied the world. And while that battle, which took place around the middle of the war, did seem to sort of be the end of the fighting on Ryloth, it now sounds like there likely were pockets of Separatist resistance on the planet all the way through till the end of the war, since it is mentioned in the newest episode of The Bad Batch that Twi'leks had been fighting for the past 3 years straight, which would imply that they were still actively fighting the conflict up to the very end. So before we talk about what happened with Ryloth after the end of the war, we have to understand two key players: Orn Free Taa, the senator for Ryloth, and Cham Syndulla, the resistance leader of the Free Ryloth Movement, which ultimately played a pivotal role in liberating the planet from the Separatists. Now, one of the big concerns of the Free Ryloth Movement during the war is that once the Republic had successfully repelled the Separatists, they would be occupied by Republic forces. And this more or less ended up being true. Even though Orn Free Taa had assured Cham Syndulla that Republic forces would leave immediately after the end of the battle, Republic forces remained on Ryloth, dealing with Separatist remnants all the way up until the very end of the war. Now, interestingly, immediately following the war, Ryloth didn't fall under Imperial control directly. Instead, Ryloth was considered an Imperial protectorate, with some faux sense of independence. Basically, while they had representation within the Imperial Senate, in a lot of ways, Ryloth could act like an independent system. However, this was just on paper. In a very practical sense, Imperial forces quickly rolled in and began gathering resources and utilizing the planet. Specifically, they began gathering valuable metals useful for the creation of large projects like the Death Star, which was now a few years into its construction. Now, at first, it seems like the Free Ryloth movement was generally in favor of the Empire, which represented peace. After all, they just spent 3 years fighting the Separatists, and the clones had been fighting along their side, so a lot of them could view the clone troopers as their brothers in arms. However, there was some shady dealings going on, and as things got worse, it appeared that the Empire started to clamp down on Ryloth. Even though they never at any point claimed Ryloth to be Imperial territory, instead still firmly insisting that Ryloth was an Imperial protectorate, the planet was still always crawling with clone troopers and then later stormtroopers. After the end of the war, the Free Ryloth movement would quickly pivot from fighting the Separatists to fighting the Empire. Basically, it sounds like within a few months of the end of the war, the Free Ryloth movement was a resistance movement against the Empire now. And it seems like this resistance movement continued to be led by Cham Syndulla. The Empire still maintained firm control of Ryloth all the way through till the end of the Galactic Civil War, with only a few key moments in that period of time calling the Empire's control into question. The first being relatively early after the end of the war, about 5 years after the end of the war, when an assassination attempt was carried out on Ryloth against the Emperor and Vader. This involved the destruction of their Imperial-class Star Destroyer, the Perilous, and ultimately left the two Sith Lords stranded on the planet until help could arrive. While the assassination attempt was obviously unsuccessful, it did put the Free Ryloth movement on the map and definitely got the attention of Imperial leadership. The Imperial campaign against Ryloth would culminate in the presence of a Quasar Fire-class carrier in orbit, which we see in Rebels. This carrier placed in orbit used a fleet of TIE bombers to harass forces on the ground and carry out a reign of terror against the local population. However, that reign of fire was brought to an end when the Quasar-class carrier in orbit was commandeered by the Rebels. But as I mentioned, Ryloth would remain under the control of the Galactic Empire right up to the end of the Galactic Civil War, basically until about 5 ABY, right around the time of the Battle of Jakku, at which point Imperial forces garrisoned on the planet all abandoned their posts and Ryloth was able to regain its independence. Now, it's not entirely clear whether they quickly joined the New Republic or whether they remained independent, but we do know they quickly sent representatives to the New Republic to represent Ryloth. So during the Empire, Ryloth had this kind of turbulent history and was one of those worlds that was always a problem for the Empire. It reminds me a lot of worlds like Kashyyyk, which were constantly in a state of uprising. And it's not really surprising. During the Clone Wars, the people of Ryloth became conditioned to fight against oppression, and in a lot of ways the Empire resembled the Separatists. But still, at no point during this period of time would they ever come close to matching their achievements during the Battle of Ryloth, when the world was liberated from Separatist control. That was an extensive campaign carried out by both the Free Ryloth Movement and the Galactic Republic. And if you want to learn about that military campaign, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down in the comments how you think the Empire should have responded to the Free Ryloth Movement. Do you think it makes sense for them to really clamp down on Ryloth, or do you think they should have just cut it loose? And if you have anything from Star Wars you want to see me talk about, leave it down below in the comments. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.